we're doing Elizabeth Barrett. Okay, so birth, she was born March 6, 1806 at Cohawks Hall in England. She's the oldest of 12 children, and they're part Creole, so that's good. Her family grew up in Jamaica, and like she was homeschooled, but she learned a lot like from her brothers and stuff, even though she was the oldest. They like helped her read and stuff. Her father was Engl Barrett, and he raised his family, in England, but like they had their business in Jamaica. It was like slave trade, so that's not good. And they relied on, that income from Jamaica. Okay. So then, her illness, she was like, her whole life kind of sucked because she was like, had this lung disease that she had to take morphine like her whole life and to do that. And then when she was 14, she had a horse accident, and it like ruined her spine. So, she wasn't doing too hot. Her religion. Okay, so she was like super, against child labor laws and slavery, and that's kind of why her and her father didn't get together very well, and like they kind of fought their whole life, because she was so like strong in her Christian faith, and she actually like taught herself Hebrew so she could read the Old Testament. And when she was 13, she wrote her first epic poem. Her father actually like published it for her. It was Battle of Marathon. And he made 50 copies. It was published in 1820. Next. Oh yeah, okay. So this is the poem I wrote my essay on, but also, it's really good. It's kind of sad. It's songs in Portuguese, and it used to not be called that. It was actually, it was something else. It got renamed that because her husband called her My Little Portuguese. I don't know. That's kind of cute. It's 14 lines, and the first 6 are about love and like the grief that kind of went with it. Like, please, accept my love, but also the grief that I have and that I carry with me, especially with the death of her mother. That was a big one. But in the simile, and some of the similes in there is Wet Wings of Thy Dove. I like that one because it's like at the end and it symbolizes like peace and new love. So at the end of the poem, it's like, you know what? I know we both have some bad things in our life, but if you'll accept me for what I have, then I'll accept you for what you have. That's all I have. Go ahead, Drew.
Okay, so I'll be doing her middle life, which is her age is 1836. Okay, so in 1826, she published her collection, which was The Mind and Other Poems. 2 years after that, her mother passed away. And after that, they slowly abolished slavery in England to mismanage on the plantation, putting the marriage income. And her father, after that, her father had sent her brothers and sisters to Jamaica to help with the estate. And that's it, the next one. Okay, so my research paper was about the father children. It is a 13-stanza poem, and it's a lyric poem. It's very emotional. It's about the condition of the children in the factories. It's a strong rhythm and rhyme scheme. It has 12 lines in it. She uses tone, symbolism, and imagery. The tone she uses to create the dreariness of the lives of the children. And she also describes the horrible lives that leads. She uses imagery to illustrate the horrible conditions. subject. And she also uses setting to the beautiful courtside with that. And she uses examples of the nature. So,
Pretty good.
I will be doing her end of life. Due to her poor health, she moved to Torquay. She spent 3 years invalid, returned to London, and resigned herself to life confined to her bedroom as an invalid. In 1845, she began exchanging letters with Robert Browning. She ended up eloping with Robert Browning behind her disapproving father's back. And then she moved to Florence, Italy. And in 1849, she gave birth to her first and only son, Robert Wideman Browning. And that's her and her son, Robert Wideman, and then that's her and her husband, Robert Browning. Okay, and then I did my research paper over one of the sonnets of the Portuguese, Sonnet 14. This sonnet is not only about the feeling of doubt and Barrett Browning's relationship, but also a description of what she thinks love should really be about. Barrett Browning begins her sonnet by asking her soon-to-be lover, Robert Browning, that if he's going to love her, that he better love her for her, not for any other reason, but for her. And that's basically it.
So, Elizabeth Barrett Browning had a very dramatic life. She suffered from illness her entire life. And if things could get more dramatic, they're going to get more dramatic, so it seems. And on June 29th in 1861, in the morning of that day, she died in her husband's arms, of all places, at the age of 55. The weakness of her lungs that Jenna talked about, it stayed terrible her entire life. And so it made her an invalid, like Priscilla discussed. And her brother Edward died when they were in Italy. He died of a drowning accident. It was the greatest sorrow of her life. It caused her to go into such a depression that she got sick again. And then when they moved to Italy, she got into Italian politics. She was very big into the Italian politics, how Italy was ran. And Count Cavour, he died a premature death. He was the Prime Minister of Italy, and he died on June 6, 1961. In 1861, I'm sorry. And that was the final blow. Losing him, that death, experienced that death, put her through so much mental and physical stress that she ended up dying. In her obituary, many journals referred to her as the greatest woman poet in English literature. In fact, one obituary in the Southern Literary Messenger referred to her as the Shakespeare of her sex, and placed her among the top 4 or 5 authors of her time. So back then, being a female poet, that was a big accomplishment because we didn't have very many female poets back then who were at least able to publicize their books as female poets. After she died, her husband Robert Browning collected, all of her poems that were left over and published them, and they were called last poems. That was one of the last things that was ever published, her writing that was ever published. The cause of death, they think they may have deciphered it after, it's been 150 years. A woman and her daughter, Anne and Ellen Buchanan, were the ones who think that they had figured it out. They think it's called hypokalemic periodic paralysis, which is a muscle disorder that causes blood levels of potassium to fall. And potassium is pretty important for you to live, not be in pain and everything. But they discovered that because Ellen Buchanan suffers from the same thing and noticed the similarities in the disorder and Barrett Browning's journal entries about her illnesses. So my poem was Sonnet 43. As you can see, the first line, it says, "How do I love thee? Let me count the ways." Everyone knows this poem, but doesn't know that they know this poem because it's been overused in weddings and soap operas and everything. It's written in iambic pentameter about Barrett Browning's, Elizabeth's, deep love for her husband. This poem exemplifies her use of religious allusions throughout the sonnets of the Portuguese. She's a very religious woman, as Jenna talked about. It uses rapturous language to describe the love she feels for Robert, and if you read the poem, you can actually feel that love yourself. It's very intense. And it talks about, or it implies, that God is love, and Robert's love brought concrete form to the concept, meaning that she knew God was love, but this showed her that God was love.
All right, so I researched over the honors and the awards that she received. And so one of the first ones that I found was that some guy made a play after Robert and Elizabeth called The Barretts of Winkle Street by Rudolph Beiser. And then the second honor, there's actually a society named after her, the Browning Society. And they give out an award to poets and other writers for such works that are prestigious enough to get it. Then one of them also is a library at Baylor. There's a library at Baylor, the Armstrong Browning Library, named after them. And then the last honor award that was received was probably the most important one that she got, was the fact was what Alex went over, how well received she was during that time period. Because during that time period, females weren't really that well received for writing or doing any literary works, and even work at all. A lot of the time they were just stuck at home doing something. So the fact that she was that well received, I mean, people came to her and was like, your work is great, your work is awesome, you're doing great. And for the fact that men were doing that in that time period, that was an honor in of itself. And that honestly trumps all of these honors that she received. So, the sonnet that I did was Sonnet 1, which is the first sonnet of the Sonnet of the Portuguese. And this sonnet, it was written about about her and Robert's relationship. She had all these questions about, like, what if it doesn't last? What if it doesn't work? Is this going to last? And she had all these questions running through her head, mainly just because, everything was going against the grain. Her father wasn't for it. They eloped, and her father was mad at her. And she was just like, is this even worth it? And towards the end, she says, guess now who holds thee. Death, I said, but there the silver answer rang, not death, but love. And then obviously, as we can see in her real life, she chooses to love Robert and marries him. And you can see in the same way in the sonnet, she expresses that as well. She chooses love, not death. She chose Robert, but not to leave him. And the sonnet is an Italian sonnet, or a Petrarchan sonnet, made famous by the Italian writer Petrarch. And it's written in iambic pentameter as well. And she used several different types of figurative language. And here she used oxymorons, and then she also used imagery as well, and diction as well. She the fact with the diction, she chose to say everything in almost past tense. I was, or I was going to, or something. And it kind of leads to the fact, how she was thinking that she was thinking that she was going to leave him, but then chose to stay. She was, but then she didn't. And then the oxymoron that I found was, where is it? The sweet, sad years, the melancholy years. Sweet and sad, melancholy, those don't really go all that well together. And then, so yeah. The basis of the poem is she expressed the fact that she was questioning the relationship, but then chose to stay and love Robert.